As that great theologian Tina Turner once asked, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a secondhand emotion? Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? They're all really good questions these days as we watch the world around us, government institutions eroding, a high court seeking to take away rights from women, a war raging on the other side of the world. It seems like we're surrounded by the sea of tribalism, of fear and hatred for one another. We're not seeing a lot of evidence of love in the world. And yet, despite what it looks like on the outside, I dare say, Jubilants, that love will win out. A Course in Miracles says the world ends in laughter. And since we're not doing a lot of laughing these days, it's not the end of the world. No matter how loudly our ego insists that it is. Remember last week I told you that witnessing or being the victim of rudeness diminishes our creativity. Y'all remember that? We had the brick and Bob heckling me very well. There's just a chance of light heckling today. So. But with everything that has transpired this week, I think researchers would say we are in a creativity drought. But you know what is creative? Anybody got an idea? What's creative?
Love.
Love! There you go. Somebody got it. Yes, love is creative. It's always creating. And it's always inviting us to be its co-creators. So Jubilants, I do not despair today because I know that there are people in this world who know that love will win, no matter what the odds. We increase both the odds and the speed of that victory of love, though, by doing what we can in the physical world to end suffering, but also to work within, to meditate, to tune into those creative solutions that are based in love that we all need in this moment in history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that our struggle in this world is to create, quote, a positive contest to harness our creative genius for the purpose of making peace and prosperity a reality for all the nations of the world. Our struggle, he says, is to create a positive contest to harness our creative genius for the purpose of making peace and prosperity a reality for all the nations of the world. And Jubilants, we don't win that contest through fear or hatred. That only happens through love. You want to know what love's got to do with it? Love is everything, right, Carolyn? It has everything to do with it. Because it's the only solution that makes the whole world say, oh yeah. After terrorists flew planes into the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001, and another plane crashed in Pennsylvania after passengers overtook the hijackers, the United States closed its airspace. It forced every plane that was in the air at that moment to land somewhere. For nearly 7,000 passengers, that meant their planes landed in a tiny Newfoundland airport in the town of Gander. The number of people on the planes almost outnumbered the population of this small Canadian town of about 10,000. So on that day, no one on the ground knew if there were terrorists aboard those 38 planes that were sitting on the tarmac in Gander, but it didn't matter. All the residents of that place and nearby towns, all they knew was they had a bunch of people in need of their kindness and their generosity and their love. What the area didn't have, however, were hotels, enough to house 7,000 people, and not enough restaurants to feed that many new people. So the residents of Gander and the surrounding fishing villages opened their homes. They opened their school gymnasiums and their community rooms and their churches. They set up cots and other accommodations for the stranded passengers. Bakeries got to work to feed the people. Hospitals staffed up to help anyone in need. And bus drivers in that area were actually on strike. But they cranked up their buses and they got everybody where they needed to go. The residents even found ways to care for the 17 dogs and cats, as well as 2 great apes that were aboard those 38 planes. Among the passengers were a man and a woman who met as they spent their days in Newfoundland, and they fell in love and got married. 2 other passengers were a gay couple who worried that they wouldn't find any acceptance in this small Canadian town, but they were welcomed with the same hospitality as everybody else. And this jubilance is what love looks like. When we think of love, what first springs to mind is really the ego's idea of love. To the ego, love is a transaction. If you do this for me, I do this for you. If you act lovingly toward me, then I will act lovingly toward you. The ego's love wants to own the other person. And we hear it in love songs all the time that proclaim, somebody is ours, and if you dare to leave me, I'll ruin you, or I'll kill myself, or something equally romantic to the ego. You're mine, right? Love that expects anything in return, or a love that seeks to own someone or something. That is not what love is about. If you want to know what love is, that ain't it. The only kind of love that is real, as we're reminded in 1 Corinthians 13, is the kind that's patient and kind. The real kind of love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth, as the Apostle Paul wrote. That's the love that those plain people, as the locals called them, that's the love they found among those residents of Gander and surrounding villages. A fierce love that flung open the doors and welcomed them, even on very short notice, and they provided for their every need without expecting anything in return. One passenger, 80-year-old Shirley Brooks Jones, spent 3 days in nearby Lewisport and wanted to do something for the town since nobody would take any money for all of these services that were just being doled out. And she was a longtime fundraiser for Ohio State University. And so on the plane back home, she passed around a notebook among the passengers. And by the time the plane landed, she had collected $15,000 for a scholarship fund for the children of Gander. That fund grew to about $2 million. And around 300 high school students had received scholarships by 2016. It's still going. This is what A Course in Miracles means when it says, salvation is a collaborative venture. We don't touch our divinity or even the depth of our own humanity alone. The real form of love, that divine, eternal love that has no end, no middle, and no beginning, it's a team sport. The people of Gander did collectively what we are called to do individually. They were open channels for that love, that holy love to just pour into the world. When we do it on our own, we make a little corner of the world brighter. But when we come together as channels of that real divine love, as those people in Gander did, we create a whole new world built on a solid foundation of love. This is the real love that reminds us of our community of spirits, our community as spirits having this bodily experience. Derm Flynn, what a great name, Derm Flynn. He was the mayor of Gander in 2001, and he said nearly 100 nationalities were gathered in the towns over those few days. They were all treated to this buffet-style meal every day, and Flynn says one guy might have been a millionaire, and the other person next to him might have been down to their last dime. It didn't matter. This was a time when people were thrust into a circumstance and situation that they were all the same. Flynn and his fellow residents embody what A Course tells us this morning. If you are grateful to your siblings, you are grateful to God for what God created. Through your gratitude, you come to know your siblings, and one moment of real recognition makes everyone your sibling, because each of them is of your holy parent. Love does not conquer all things, but it does set all things right. Love is not out there conquering. It's just making it all the same. You want to know what love is, jubilants? You need not take a gander much further than a town called Gander. Breathe deep. In our Jesus story this morning, we find our guy doing what he does best, schooling his opponents on the finer points of the law. A lawyer decides to ask Jesus, which commandment is the most important? Now, this was a test because according to Jewish law, if you break one commandment, you've broken them all. So the right answer would be all of them. Jesus, though, he picks two. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And Jesus' answer is positively scandalous. And it gives the Pharisees and his other opponents more fodder against him. But the truth of the matter is, these two verses are still offending people thousands of years later. I think even today, most of us would agree that it is good and right to love God with everything we have, with our heart and our soul and our mind. We would also nod in agreement that it's good to love our neighbor. Where we and those sitting in person with Jesus all those centuries ago tend to get tripped up is the whole loving your neighbor as yourself. And I would offer that the world we see around us is already the fulfillment of this law on the egoic level. Because we are loving the world just as we love ourselves, and it proves one thing. We have no idea what it means to love ourselves. No idea. I believe that if we get that first part right, truly understanding how to love ourselves, then that fierce, true, and creative power of love will be revealed, and nothing evil, wrong, violent, or offensive will be able to stand against it. The love we feel for ourselves on this egoic level, like the love we offer to the world, it's all transactional. We will love ourselves once we are smarter, once we like what we see in the mirror, once we are richer, once we are more powerful, once we are less addicted, once we are happier and more respected, then we will love ourselves. We will love ourselves when the outside world gives us what we want, fulfills our every need, and goes out of its way to never upset us or hit an emotional trigger. Then we will love ourselves, right? We got all these conditions. Spend 5 minutes on Facebook and tell me what kind of self-love is being lived out in the world. You can see it. It's what starts wars. We do love the world as we love ourselves. And it has produced a selfish, warring, unstable, cruel, greedy, controlling, and downright recalcitrant world. Do you like this world that we've created? Do you like it? It's a rough place, right? If you don't, it's time to work on that part and truly learn to love ourselves without conditions, without regard to outer circumstances. To love yourself, A Course in Miracles says in chapter 11, to love yourself is to heal yourself. The only way we heal and truly love ourselves is to remember this one thing: salvation is a collaborative venture. Let's say that together. Salvation is a collaborative venture. And what that means, jubilants, is that developing that deep love for ourself, that capital S self that is our divinity, it is a team sport. We do not accomplish this ever by ourselves. A Course tells us that we are always teaching and we are always learning, and they are the same thing. That means that in our thoughts and actions, we're constantly teaching the world what we believe about ourselves. And A Course says we can either teach crucifixion or we can teach resurrection. We can teach either fear or we can teach love. And here's the thing, though. Whatever it is we're teaching is what we attract to us. When I was teaching anger and negativity in my earlier years, I had a really angry and negative community. How did that happen? They were my mirror. And the self-love we reflect back to one another was what caused more anger and negativity. So if salvation is a collaborative venture, then our miscreation of fear and separation is as well. That's why, Jubilants, we got to be willing to recognize what we are teaching and learning in the world at every moment. Are we teaching fear? Are we teaching mistrust? Are we teaching separation, anger, or negativity? Check your Facebook posts. They'll tell you what you're doing. Or are we teaching love? Are we teaching trust? Are we teaching unity and gentleness and positivity? And if you want to know what you're teaching, look around you. Who's in your community? Because they will reflect back to you what kind of self-love you have going on. Those residents of Gander, Newfoundland, they were a clear mirror of unconditional self-love for all those plain people who descended on their town. And it wasn't by accident. It wasn't just a community that went, well, let's go. In the years prior to this event, they had implemented an emergency management plan, and it was mainly aimed at what the town would do if there were ever a plane crash in the area. They had a plan in place that included logistics for the planes, logistics for the people and the animals who were stranded, and it wasn't one person's job. It was the whole community, everybody. And that's our call, Jubilants, to become so dedicated to teaching and learning about true self-love that we have a community that we can call on when we're in need and be that community for others who need us. Those in Gander were living a course. They were showing gratitude for all the holy siblings that just landed in their town on 9/11. Nobody asked about political and religious difference. Nobody asked about any divisive topic. They just showed up with their inner mirrors and reflected their love out into the world. So what are you teaching today, Jubilants? Are we teaching small s, selfish self-love that takes what it can get and leaves others to fend for themselves? Or are we teaching that unconditional, infinite, capital S self-love that shows appreciation for every holy sibling that crosses our path, for every holy sibling that crosses our mind at any given part of our day? God will come to you only as you will give God to your siblings, a course reminds us. God will come to you only as you give God to your siblings. Learn first of them. Learn first of them, and you will be ready to hear God. That is because the function of love is one. If you really, really want to know what love is, Jubilants, prepare yourself to see it everywhere. Look for it in everybody you meet. Those you consider your loved ones, strangers, especially those you see as enemies, especially those coworkers that challenge the hell out of you. What are you reflecting to them? And what can you see in the mirror they hold up for you? Those we love make us feel loved, but how often are we reflecting love on those we would rather hate? Those outside of you that you hate, they're just reflecting your own pattern of hatred right back at you. If it weren't inside of you, you wouldn't see it. And when you do see it, it's a sign that you need some healing. If others are doing great harm in the world around you, find a way to mitigate or end that suffering. That is still our job physically. But don't think you're any better than those who are acting on their hatred in the world. Because you see, it's part of all of us. And it's hampering our ability to truly love ourselves. So instead, try appreciating those you see as enemies, because they're giving you a gift. They're giving you the gift of self-awareness and the opportunity to heal a part of your own inner world, so you can end not just your own suffering, but their suffering too. Salvation is a collaborative venture. And it begins with learning to truly love ourselves without condition. And when we do fulfill the law and the prophets by ending our feelings of separation within, then we bring out that unifying love that makes the whole world say, oh yeah.